Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. Texas Governor and Imperial Grand Wizard Greg the Aryan Abbott just signed a bill making illegal immigration a state crime in Texas, punishable by potentially up to 20 years in prison for repeat offenders. It's only about 40 years too late, but better late than never, I suppose, right? A presidential run is definitely out of the question for him, and I think that he's pretty much used up his time as governor, so I'm not entirely sure what his angle is or what the point of this legislation is. I'm thinking it's meant merely as agitprop to force the issue to the political forefront, but it seems to be making all the right people angry. The White House is considering a legal challenge, which is almost certain. Mexico's own corrupt do-nothing empty suit says that he's going to challenge the law naturally. Mexico challenges any legislation the United States writes that has to do with immigration. Imagine, though, being such a failure as a leader. Imagine having such a failed state that you don't even want your own citizens, your own neighbors, your own family members back. The reason Mexico is the basket case it is because the corrupt pack of vipers who run that country have been using the U.S. as a steam valve, so they never have to fix things there. Mexico's institutions are broken because its culture is broken, and the people who would actually be able to fix it are the ones who are being incentivized to leave, and thus the culture of corruption remains intact. But of course, being a failed state also means that it's a kleptocracy too. There's the hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in remittances that illegals and legals in the U.S. send back to Mexico every year. This is nothing but free money that the corrupt elite get to vacuum up for nothing. It's also a place where the government refuses to enforce their laws because if they did, most of them would be in prison by day's end. They don't want the law enforced in their own land, and they're demanding that it not be enforced in the U.S. either. Now, the thing to remember is this has to do with illegal aliens from south of the border. And yet, for some strange reason, or rather the same old reasons, you got those people who are trying to claim that this has something to do with black people. They're determined to shoehorn us into this conversation that we have nothing to do with.
But tonight, the ACLU and Texas Civil Rights Project suing Texas, hoping to stop what they call the most anti-immigrant law before it ever goes into effect.
The bill overrides bedrock constitutional principles and flouts federal immigration law while harming Texans, in particular, brown and black communities.
This law doesn't apply to black people at all. We have nothing to do with this. This law doesn't disadvantage us at all. This is more white liberals trying to do what they did when they wanted to make a federal gay marriage law. With that one, they made all kinds of phony claims, total lies, saying that it was meant to protect interracial marriages, and they always made sure to show black people whenever they said that. That law had nothing to do with us, and neither does this one. This is more of, as Malcolm said, using us as political footballs in their games of power politics. And this is also the result of black misleaders and half-brained sellout activists using the phrase black and brown all the time. These self-interested anti-black racists on the left have seized on that phrase to promote policies that harm us while lying and claiming we're trying to protect black people. This is them trying to tie us into this and give people the false impression that black people are in favor of this tsunami of illegal immigration, when we're not. The ACLU is who this woman works for. Now tell me, what has the ACLU ever done for reparations? What have they done about all the legal discrimination that we face? When have they ever gone to bat for us and claimed that reparations for us, specific legal protections and tangibles for us, would be a benefit for everyone else? And that if we are denied reparations, then this harms brown people too, or anyone else? They never do that. This irrational exaggeration and hyperbole about the harms of policies only gets expanded when they think that they can rope us into the fight. So the ACLU is not on our side. They're working against us. It is reprehensible that they're trying to drag black people into this, because what they're really trying to do is they're trying to hide behind the coattails of our suffering, and they're trying to also hide behind the moral legitimacy that we represent, the unique moral legitimacy that we represent. This law has nothing to do with us, and it's not going to be harming black people at all. Again, I'm no fan of Greg Abbott. He's pure trash and anti-black racist, full stop. This law, however, doesn't have anything to do with us. And considering the open, blatant racism of Latin American culture and the way that they practice that same racism when they come to the U.S., this law actually would benefit us if it was enforced. That's not to say that we need to weigh in on this or that we need to stick up for Greg Abbott. Wrong on both counts. But understand, the white left isn't looking out for us. They're trying to use and exploit us. And all the years of letting these black bootlicks throw around the phrase black and brown and do it with impunity, now you got these white leftists doing the same thing for their own interests. These so-called black activists, who only the white media ever decide to call our leaders, they're the ones who the white media will put on TV, and they're the ones who helped to push the idea that the black community saw itself as part of some multiracial alliance. The problem is we were the only ones in the alliance. We were the only ones talking about black and brown. Whenever Hispanic legislators and activists and media personalities get on camera or in print, they only talk about Latino interests. Most of them avoid saying brown at all, because a majority of them identify as white. So this whole black, brown, whatever, it's been dysfunctional and fraudulent from the very beginning. So how serious is the wheelchair-bound wacko Abbott? How serious is the Texas GOP? In my book, not very. There's a flood of illegals coming into Texas, coming into the Southwest every single day. Far, far more than the existing police and courts there could ever hope to handle. If somebody really wanted to make illegal immigration a criminal offense, first they would need a ton of new police dedicated solely to illegal immigrant apprehension, as well as prosecutors solely for this purpose, more judges, more courtrooms, and a lot more incarceration facilities. All of that requires a huge hike in taxes to pay for all that. And if there's one thing that Texans in general and Republicans in specific hate more than illegal immigrants, it's taxes. If they were serious, this will require an enormously expanded prison industrial complex in that state, and neither Abbott the Aryan, nor Klansman Ken Paxton, nor any of the rest of that kindergarten of cronies down there has said a peep about that. No money, and not even a proposal about more personnel or facilities to be built. So how do they even intend to do this imaginary idea? Even if you make existing police handle all the apprehensions, you still have to prosecute the offenders, and that means more prosecutors and more judges. So the only way that I would be able to even remotely take them seriously if they had also announced plans to fund this grand idea and facilities to be built to service it. As of right now, all it is more political theater. Wake me up if this little drama ever has an act 2. And speaking of legal consequences, the state Supreme Court of Colorado in a 4-3 decision has ruled that Donald Trump is ineligible to be on that state's primary ballot due to his violating the 14th Amendment of the Constitution when he led an insurrection in 2021. So, what does this ruling mean for the 2024 election? Well, as for this ruling by itself, not much. First of all, Trump didn't win Colorado in 2016 or in 2020. His Democratic opponents carried that state in both those election cycles, so it's not like he needs it in order to become president. But there's the question of whether this will start a judicial domino effect against him. So far, his team has successfully fended off the attempts in other states to remove him from the ballot. But this is the first time the 14th Amendment challenge against him actually worked. So will other state Supreme Courts take this as precedent? The U.S. Supreme Court will certainly hear this case, and already the white media is shrieking that Clarence Thomas has to resign or recuse himself because his wife not only campaigned for Trump, but she also tried to help his illegal electors scheme too. This is going to cause a constitutional crisis when it lands in front of them. No matter how the Supreme Court rules, Trump put a number of those judges on the bench. They're people who he chose for their loyalty and willingness to be political extremists. The Democrats have set up a high-stakes game of political chicken. And it will be very interesting to see if these Federalist Society flunkies blink. The Democrats, of course, are denying all responsibility for this ruling in Colorado, but let's be honest. These are Democrats bringing all these lawsuits. Now, I gotta tell you, though, as a matter of law, I personally agree with the Colorado Supreme Court's ruling. Trump did carry out an insurrection in 2021. But does anyone seriously believe that the Democrats would be fighting so hard to have Trump removed from all of these state ballots if his polling was, say, in the low double digits or even the single digits? If Donald Trump was indeed in the toilet bowl when it came to his public approval ratings, do you think they would actually be going through all this trouble? Or do you think that they would be doing what they were doing in the hours and days following the 2020 election? Crowing about how Trump was now gone, and how Trumpism was on the ash heap of history, and how before long this guy would be forgotten. He was an empty suit, and nobody would even care about him. His own followers would abandon him because they would eventually accept the reality. Only that didn't happen. I'm not a fan of Trump because he hasn't done anything for us, but the Democrats are trying to portray this as an impartial judicial process here. And that's not true either. In fact, a few of them have let the mask slip, and they've admitted that this is about removing a man from the ballot who they know would most likely beat Biden in 2024. A recent poll released this week has Biden's approval rating at an all-time low of only 34%. His attempts to duplicate Obama's talking around the issues and trying to overcome people with his personality isn't working. He has to make big moves to benefit the American people, and his problem is he's still trying to keep the donor class happy. He's trying to see if he can talk his way to re-election, and people are tired of it. And Biden's lunk-headed attempts to try to BS his way past the voters aren't the only thing that's getting old. Biden himself is ancient at this point. What's called for is for him to go ahead and bow out of the race and somebody else to be the party's nominee, but Kamala Harris would be an even worse candidate than Biden, so they're stuck with Jim Crow Joe. But Biden's problem here is that there's no pandemic to bail him out this time. And yet, even with all that, even with all the tons of lawsuits that Trump is buried under, even with the judicial rulings, Biden is still behind Trump in the polls. Part of the reason why people are having a hard time accepting what's going on is because it looks exactly like what it is, a massive piling on of litigation on a candidate who the Democrats don't feel confident that they can beat. They're denying that that's what they're doing, but that's sure what it looks like. Now, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people who will try to claim that, well, you can't actually prove that this is some sort of plot that the Democrats are putting forward to basically get the guy off the ballot because they can't beat him in the election. Well, here's my question. Strictly as a thought exercise, if the Democrats were trying to weaponize the law to remove Trump as a candidate because they know they couldn't beat him by any other means, would it look any different than this? On the one hand, Trump did lead an insurrection, but on the other hand, he's more popular than the man he lost the election to 3 years ago. His opponents have been beside themselves at the prospect of him getting back into office, especially since he's declared that he's going to be wreaking vengeance on anyone who offended him. And as for black people, I would give the same analysis about Trump that I do about Biden. No matter how many lawsuits Trump has to contend with, or how dire the potential consequences for him might be, he can't be taking it too seriously, otherwise he would be coming to black voters and trying to make a deal. If he thinks disenchanted black voters merely staying home next year will be enough to secure him victory, well, he's probably right. Democrats are certainly terrified of that prospect, but this isn't about the party's political futures, this is about ours. This is why I say that we cannot back the GOP, because like the Democrats, they're also trying to figure out how to win elections without doing anything for us. We cannot lower our political standards. That's something that black people are notorious for. Always so desperate to get anything, even just a pat on the head from these candidates, anything that even remotely sounds like they're going to do something for us, and failing that, well, just tell us that you don't mind having us around. And in the process, we always settle for accepting anything, or rather, we settle for accepting nothing at all. Maybe Trump genuinely thinks that he can regain the White House without offering us anything. He's certainly welcome to try, but considering how things went south for Trump's casinos, if I were him, I wouldn't be so eager to make such a high-stakes gamble. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Dwayne Demps, Michael Gilmore, Deep I 904, Thomas Jones, and Naji95. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.